All right. All right. Hello. I am Chris Hatch, and I'm the Capital Formation Manager at Launch Tennessee. I would like to welcome all of you to the Southeast Capital Call. This is our second installment of this ongoing quarterly meeting, and we are very excited to see both new and returning faces. For those who don't know, Launch Tennessee is a public-private partnership with the vision to make Tennessee the most startup-friendly state in the nation. We empower network partners and other stakeholders by making resources accessible in order to activate sustainable economic growth in Tennessee. Our goal in hosting these events is to spur connectivity amongst investors and other capital providers who are actively seeking alpha in the Southeast. It is our belief that collaboration across the region and the country now will create the innovation and economic opportunity that will support many generations in the future. Our goal is to bring thought-provoking conversations to this audience that will spark new ideas and investment strategies. Today's event will feature a keynote and panel discussion highlighting investment trends and opportunities in the food and ag tech industry, and will feature Rob Dengosky, agribusiness leader for Ernst & Young globally, alongside CEOs of some highly successful startups, which we're really excited to have join us today. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Launch Tennessee supports 4 industry-focused mentor networks as part of the network of resources that I mentioned earlier. One of those is the Agriculture Mentor Network, which is focused on incubating new technology companies in the food and ag tech space. We would like to acknowledge our partners in that initiative, the incredible teams at the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center and Ag Launch, who are doing the work day in and day out to accelerate amazing companies in ag tech. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Rob Dengosky. As EY's global food and agribusiness leader, Rob is at the forefront of industry issues, working directly with executives to optimize their approach in the global markets. Rob works across the food and agriculture value chain, integrating innovation, driving digital adoption, and developing strategy. Through his work with corporate clients, private equity firms, venture capitalists, and the accelerator community, Rob has become a knowledge leader on matters of critical importance to global and market-leading companies. Rob's experience ranges from growth strategy to operating model design to digital innovation across the agri-food value chain. He works directly with client executives in the design and implementation of the appropriate operating model for their business, including strategy, portfolio management, marketing, merchandising, digital operational areas, and back office efficiency. So thank you all again for joining us today, and enjoy the conversation.
Great, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that the introduction and quite the run through of my background. So thank you for that. Hopefully, you guys can see the screen I'm sharing here. So what I want to do is just take a few minutes and just walk through a concept we call food system reimagined. And really, when we've looked at the food system we have for the last several years, we are strongly convinced that the food system is going to face structural and systemic change over the next decade. And so what food system reimagined is, it looks at the system overall and is really kind of created a platform to think about what are those changes. And for a lot of folks that are directly in the food system, or those that are investing or supporting the food system, it really starts to explore what's the art of the possible. So not going to go through the whole thing today, but did want to show you just a couple things I think are kind of set the stage for our panel discussion. So let me scan over a little bit. And one of the things that we've really seen, coming, changing in the system, and then now through COVID, we've certainly validated is the way food is processed and delivered. We've seen that before COVID, we saw the rise of plant-based alternative proteins, such as Impossible Foods or Beyond Meats, and we think those kinds of innovations will continue. The other one we see are the consumers are more and more asking for short ingredient decks, and what that really means, if you're creating a food product from scratch, is keep it to 5 ingredients or less, and make sure the consumer knows what each of those ingredients are. That's what's most in vogue, most on trend with consumers today. The days of, and we still have a ton of food in the system that has a lot of ingredients in that we're not quite sure what they are from just a layperson standpoint, and those are falling out of favor, and consumers really are looking for foods they can pronounce. The next one is clean labels. So more and more, and particularly in the pandemic, folks want clean labels. then kind of work your way down functional ingredients and all the way down to targeted diets. All these things are kind of today, and we expect these to continue to evolve as we go forward into the future. Let me just zoom out a second just to give you a sense. When we think about the food system, there's a lot in here, and we show a kind of a map of what we think that future looks like. Given time, we can't go through that today, but I am going to focus on one area that I think will set the stage, and it's what we call the paradoxes of food and agriculture. And if you really step back and think about it, and where we're at today is big food is on the decline and small food is more popular. And this is really on the backs of consumers' distrust of large institutions is not just a food issue, it's a government issue. Any large institutions, consumers today have a high distrust of, and big food falls into that category. And so consumers are really looking for small food, local food, niche brands, things they find novel. That's really what is more on the trend line today. The next paradox is in the world today, we have both hunger and obesity. And most people think immediately, oh, you mean US and countries in Africa, as the real kind of, too far polar poles. The reality is we have hunger and obesity in our communities that each of us live in today. And so how do we serve food in an equal basis, and how do we give good food to people so they eat the right things and avoid healthcare risks down the line, such as diabetes and so forth on the obesity side? And then how do we take care of the several million people in the US alone that go to bed hungry every night? Then the next paradox is we spend right now about 10 times more money on pharmaceutical research and development than we do food research or food R&D. So in essence, we're spending 10 times more money to fix people than feed people. And the convergence of food and health has never been stronger. And so we're seeing trend lines coming out of the medical communities talking about specific diets to combat certain illnesses or to have a more healthy lifestyle. And so the rise of food R&D we expect to be on the up as we go forward in the next decade. Less carbon, more protein. Generally in the world, we're getting more wealthy. And so with that wealth means people want to upgrade their diets, and that typically means protein. But animal production agriculture is one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases in the world. So how do we produce more protein and less carbon at the same time? This is really a challenge that the industry has overall. And I think it's an opportunity for investors and innovators alike. We can look at things like Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat, but I don't think that's going to go far enough. So we've really got to come up with novel ways to contain the carbon footprint. Science and marketing. Today, marketing trumps science in many cases. In some cases, good marketers are taking advantage of science, and they're putting things on labels that consumers find attractive, although many of us in the industry say there's really not a lot behind the label. So when is marketing, when is science? And these two are certainly playing off each other. And I'll quickly go through the last two. People in and food out. Up until COVID, urbanization rates were forecasted to really just keep continuing across the world. Now, COVID has put a little bit of a pause on that, and some of our research with our Future Consumer Index is saying now, I think approximately 26% of people are seeking to move to a less dense environment than where they're at today. Now, too soon to call that a trend or a reversal of urbanization, but the reality is we have more people in the cities than we've ever had before, and those same people want their food, which has grown out, and we just don't have enough people in the rural communities to grow the food they want. So how do we think about putting food in places that are more dense, which really starts to open up the conversation around controlled environment agriculture, and specifically vertical farming, greenhouses, indoor farming, those kinds of activities. And we just saw one of those companies go public here a couple of weeks ago, App Harvest out of Kentucky. So, and strong suspicions there'll be another one right around the corner. So really a great space to see indoor farming really take light. And the very last one I'll end on is today in the United States specifically, and really in most parts of the world, we have a system built for scale. We have one of the most efficient food systems in the world. The average American spends less than 8% of their incomes on food, one of the lowest in the world, which is good. But at the same time, during COVID, we saw that same highly efficient system bend, but it didn't break, which is great news. But now when we look at consumers really want personalized food choices. And we're not that far away from looking at our Apple Watch. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're ready for a snack, and and your Apple Watch says you need 20 grams of protein, and here's 3 food options you have. Which one do you want to buy? And you can have it delivered to you. That kind of personalization becomes real, and I think that kind of personalization flies in the face of a system we've spent decades building at scale. So let me pause. I think we're going to go to our panel discussion and bring in our panelists and give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. But hopefully, this quick interview of our food system reimagined framework, hopefully it gives you a little bit of a backdrop of what we're going to be talking about today. So with that, Tomer, Michael, and Hunter, do you want to join the stage?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tomer. Welcome.
Thank you.
Michael, got you. Welcome.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Rob.
And we're just waiting on Hunter.
Hey,
there
Rob.
he is. Perfect. Well, folks, maybe take just a minute or so just to introduce yourself, and then let's get right into questions. So, Hunter, you want to start with a quick introduction? Oh, hey, Jason. Sorry, I didn't see you join. Thank you.
Yeah, should I introduce the company as well, just myself to kick things off here?
Yeah, both. Just
a little bit of both. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, hey everyone. My name is Hunter McDaniel. I'm the founder and CEO of Ubiquity. We're an advanced materials company powering product innovation and clean energy in agriculture. Essentially, we make a luminescent material that's effective at manipulating light, and that's being deployed in our first product called UbiGrow in the controlled environment agriculture industry to manipulate the spectrum of sunlight, basically to give you a more optimal light condition in a greenhouse, similar to what you would achieve with lighting, but without having to use the electricity involved. And my background's technical. I have a PhD in material science engineering, and I founded the company in 2014 after finishing a stint at Los Alamos National Laboratory. So we're based in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Wonderful. Thanks, Hunter.
Yeah.
Michael, you want to go next?
Thank you, Rob. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Bartholomew. I'm a reformed rocket scientist, and I'm now in the world of high tech. I'm the CEO of TrueTech Technologies. TrueTech has been recognized by the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer in really 2 key fields: pharma and food supply chain security, and also patient and consumer safety. Our solution extends to fields including food quality assurance and similar. The company's core technology platform materials and hyperspectral imaging. I'll address those both individually. With our materials technology, we're commercializing the world's first low-cost, invisible, highly secure, and FDA-approved edible barcodes that can be read by downloading an app onto a mobile phone, and are used by all stakeholders in the food supply chain, including the end consumer, to ensure provenance, veracity, safety, and factors like that. These barcodes are called crypto anchors because they tether highly secure blockchain-based back-end track and trace systems to the physical assets. That's the current weakness today. Barcodes, QR codes don't fulfill that function because they're not secure. And security is at the foundation of what we will be discussing today. And this can be on dose or on food or on package. With our imaging technology, we're introducing unique capabilities in the fields of precision agriculture, inline machine vision systems to improve food quality, and handheld units that are fostering the migration of food safety, via pathogen detection from central labs to point of care application, thereby dramatically reducing analysis times. So I think, in summary, our platforms digitize the physical world and encourage a generation of big data to promote positive patient and consumer outcomes. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to spending this time with you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Tomer, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. So yeah, I'm the CEO of Cropix. Cropix is an ag analytics startup. Our solution has a hardware and a software component to it. On the hardware side, soil sensors that we developed ourselves. You can see one here. Very unique in the sense that they're scalable, do it yourself, installed by farmers in just 5 minutes. So very attractive cost per acre and ROI. And on the software side, there's an app that farmers download where we connect all of the various data layers. So real-time data coming from the sensors from the soil, with satellite imagery and weather data and crop models and topography and as applied irrigation data, probably 15 different data streams, to help farmers do a better job with irrigation, with nutrient management. That's CropX.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. Jason, how about you? Quick intro?
Yes, sir. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm the president and CEO of a company called Farm Mobile. We're based in Kansas City, and we have, similar to what Tomer was talking about, we have a hardware device that goes onto a tractor or a sprayer or a harvester. And our goal is to, in real time, collect the data, stream it to the cloud so that we can turn it into a standardized data set that can be then fed to other systems to produce increased value. One of the biggest challenges we have in our country is farming is generally still analog, and trying to take that analog world and make it digitized is a much larger challenge than most belief exists today. So you've got a couple of things that make this challenging. One is unreliable cellular environment. So getting data into a database is still very difficult. The second one is that we've got mixed fleets of equipment, and a lot of the manufacturers design those pieces of equipment not to be compatible from a data standpoint. And then the third one is just the fact that we have a lack of standards once we get all of this data together to be able to get it into another system. So at Farm Mobile, we work on the hardware, we work on a data engine, we work on data distribution.
Thank you, Jason. So let's jump in. When I finished my paradoxes, I talked a little bit about we've got a system built for scale, consumers wanting personalization. How do each of you see technology and innovation enabling consumers and farmers and ranchers? Michael, let's start with you.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think it touches on all aspects, right? All aspects of what you talked about, Rob. I mean, from a food, consumers care about where food is sourced, ethical sourcing of material. Producers care about productivity, yield improvement, distribution. So at the end of the day, all of these facets, being able to get the relevant information and optimize the whole system from a security, safety, distribution, sourcing standpoint is going to be critical to meet the mandates of really a growing population and complex, the complex geopolitics that we face today.
Yeah. Hunter, you had something you wanted to add?
Well, I was just going to note that there's this growing trend. It's been going on for years for fresh organic produce, and I think controlled environment agriculture is a great answer to that. Greenhouses can be put in cities on rooftops, and you can bring the food directly to those consumers in those urban areas, and then you get organic for free just because of the structure keeps the pesticides out. Keeps the pest out. You don't need to use pesticides. So I think this macro trend that we're seeing with controlled environment agriculture, whether that's vertical farming or greenhouses, is an example of how the market is responding to consumer tastes. But you got to have the costs in check too, and I think that's where vertical farming has stumbled a little bit. Just the cost associated with powering all of those lights. Basically, it's all electrically powered. And now you see the rise of greenhouses kind of filling in that gap. And App Harvest is a perfect example that you mentioned, going public recently, but there's been some other huge financings in this space, and that's so we're happy to be addressing that market.
Yeah, great. And we also saw, a longtime player like Driscoll Berries partner up with Plenty, who is kind of on the leading edge. So we're starting to see some interesting collaborations out there as well. Jason, Tomer, what role do you see technology innovation? How's it going to help farmers and ranchers that are bringing row crops, corn, soy, they're bringing beef, pork, poultry to market? How do you see tech and innovation helping enable those businesses?
Yeah, I think that at a field level, we can do a better job at collecting data, at being able to understand what practices are working on that specific field. All this stuff is so localized that there isn't a formula that works everywhere. You've got soil types that change, you've got weather that changes, you've got seeds that react differently to different fertility programs and different crop protection programs. Having all that stuff categorized so that a grower at the end of the year can look back and see what worked and what didn't on their specific fields is really helpful to them to make better decisions going forward.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes, I think that's what AgTech is all about. Essentially, if you kind of take a look at most of the AgTech companies, it's essentially helping farmers do a better job using data. What does, do a better job mean? Well, it could be saving on inputs, whether those are, chemicals or fertilizer or irrigation, water, or increasing yield, probably a combination of both. And that's exactly what most of the companies are doing.
Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit. We've spent really the last several decades, particularly in the middle of the food system, food manufacturers trying to figure out what do consumers want to buy. That was really the equation. Do they want sugary cereals? Do they want healthy cereals? Do they, what is it they want to buy? And more recently, in the last 5 years or so, we're trying to figure out where do they want to buy? Do they want it online? Do they want to click and collect? Do they want to walk in the stores? And I think now we're actually starting to shift to the next wave, which is why do they want to buy? We're seeing sustainability, food safety, traceability, all these topics really, starting to influence the buyer. But those things take money. Michael, you've got a tracing solution, that you talked about. All these things take money. Will consumers, do you expect them to pay more for their food to have the information that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things you brought up earlier on, Rob, was trust, right? Ultimately, everything's built on trust. So I think, consumers are savvy, they're tech savvy, they're a lot more concerned about where their food is sourced and how it derives to them. And I think absolutely they're willing to pay incremental costs to fulfill their buying mandates, whether it's social and impact mandates, whether it's health mandates. So I think we've seen that, and you've actually addressed that in sort of this transition from factory farming to micro farms. People care where their food comes from, and I think they're willing to pay a premium for that. But I think a lot of that cost burden will also be taken up by companies. Now, I'll just give you one example. I don't think people realize that the cost of the global economy that food fraud costs is $40 billion a year. And I'll give you one example. Australia, which makes 10% of the beef on this planet, ships about 100 metric tons to China, where it magically becomes 200 metric tons, courtesy of rat meat, horse meat, soy byproducts, and other stuff. So you can imagine what Australian beef producers, ranchers, and the industry are losing from fraud and diversion. So I think they are certainly willing not only to address these types of issues from a market share standpoint and a brand protection standpoint, but then also address the concerns, the buying factors of consumers, again, in terms of good economics, which is what it all boils down to at the end of the day.
Yeah. Tomer and Jason, are farmers ready to farm differently? To put more sustainable practices in place? What are you seeing?
I'm not sure that I think farmers are on average struggling and need to be provided better solutions or tools or change practices in order to be able to produce what we need them and want them to produce, and still be able to maintain a business. And so I'm not sure they would be willingly able or wanting to invest more and hurt their bottom line, but I think it's about maintaining the bottom line and increasing efficiency. And I know from Cropix is located mostly in Israel, so we have kind of a good access to the European market. There, from the consumer perspective, you see that in many places the consumers want to maintain and want to get fresh produce and high quality food, but they're not necessarily wanting to pay for it, and the governments are actually subsidizing this and subsidizing agriculture in entire Europe, more or less. So yes, I think people will want all of the goodies that you described at the beginning of your conversation. I'm just not sure where the money's going to come from, and I'm not sure it's going to be then the consumer or the farmer.
Yeah,
I would say that in the row crop agriculture, these farmers are the ultimate entrepreneurs, and so they're pretty good at figuring out how to survive. A lot of them have been on the land, for generations, and you see a trend for them not wanting to grow commodities anymore. Okay, you're talking about our being built for the mass storage and the mass flow of homogeneous product, but I think we're seeing a lot of these start to experiment with different practices and slowly converting over parts of their acreage to higher value crops, similar to what happens in a lot of the the regions where they grow produce. So I think we're starting to see a blend of that already, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to do better, but a lot of it's based upon the consumers' demand for it. And I think we can't assume all consumers are the same, right? There's a really small segment of the consumer that wants to know about everything, and there's a bigger portion of the consumer that's just pretty excited to get some food at a decent price.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at the trade-offs, I mean, farmers and ranchers, they tend to make all their buying decisions off of 3 criteria, right? It's profit, risk, and effort, and so if you think about that, where does sustainability fit into that equation? Can they make more money? Can they reduce their effort as they lower risk? I mean, how do you see sustainable farming practices, whether, Hunter, it's in an indoor environment or for Jason and Tomer in the outside world, how do you see them investing in sustainability?
I think it can work. I mean, organic's a good example because you go to the grocery store and look at the price of your organic lettuce or tomatoes, it's going to be nearly twice. So the consumer's paying for that, and they demand transparency. I think this is something that the market's had to learn the hard way over the past 10 to 20 years. But, it's better to just be straight with the consumer about what they're getting, what the energy impact or, other kinds of impacts that exist there. And I wouldn't sell the consumer short. I think they are willing to pay up for those, for a more sustainable product, or obviously a more healthy product or a fresher product. But we just need to get better about being transparent all up and down the value chain and communicate that effectively to the consumer. That's how I view it anyway.
Yeah. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of, there's obviously a lot of talk about sustainability, but in the places where I really see sustainability implemented, many times it's driven by regulation and government. Like, we just acquired a company in New Zealand, and there the dairy industry is highly regulated, so they can really prevent, nitrogen runoff and leaching, off of dairy farms. We see similar movements now in Ireland, for example, that has a very advanced dairy industry, and in other places that's not yet happening, and it is happening where government has intervened already.
I think a challenge with the term sustainability is it means different things to different people, and I don't think we have a unified definition of really what that means. I mean, nobody out there says, I want to eat food that's not sustainable. Like, that's just not logical. So I think for us to better define what these practices are is really important to our industry moving forward to promote participation in those programs.
Yeah, and sustainability.
Yeah, and the hope.
Go ahead, Hunter.
The hope of ag tech is that you can have your cake and eat it too. I mean, if you have the technology, you should be able to do it sustainably without imparting an additional burden or cost. And I think that's something that we're all striving for, right? Is we don't really want to make food more expensive and more sustainable at the same time. I think you can potentially have both. And that's one of the ways that we're approaching the market, with a lower cost product that has no electricity needs, that's similar to the benefits you can get from supplemental lighting. And it's just about bringing that technology to market, communicating to growers that this is available, and demonstrating that it really does work, like we say. But yeah, I mean, I think that you can. That's the dream of ag tech, right? Is to have both.
And the market isn't homogenous, right? For a lot of the things we're talking about, there's at least at a 30,000-foot level, there's a socioeconomic delineation. And I think that's something that we see quite pointedly.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in an age right now where segmentation it doesn't go far enough. We have to hyper segment the market. If the market moves from scale to personalization, you have to create a market of one. And so absolutely great point. We've seen a ton of innovation in the most recently in some of the plant-based proteins, right? Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat. Certainly they've gotten a lot of attention. There's 2 other categories of alternative proteins, right? We've got cultured meat, and Tomer, you got some neighbors in Israel that are doing some pretty interesting things around cultured meat. And then we got protein fermentation as well. As you look at those, how do you see innovation in plant-based, cultured meat, and fermentation? How do you see those impacting what each of your companies are doing?
Well, we're mainly focused on the high value vegetables, just as our initial markets, like tomatoes, cucumbers. Getting into some of the lower value as you go down, leafy greens and herbs and such. So none of those, as far as I'm aware, are being used for protein plant-based foods. So it's a little bit outside of our scope.
Good. Let's shift to a little bit different area. Farm sizes keep getting bigger in the U.S. across the world, right? We're seeing a kind of an increase of farm sizes. Yet at the same time, the demand for corn and soy on a long-term basis is forecasted to not continue to increase. Demand of, because of alternative fuels, alternative proteins, say, hey, maybe we don't need as much corn and soy. So will the large producers, folks running these big mega farms, do you think they'll continue to focus on yields and farm efficiency, or will they also look to diversify their production away from just traditional corn and soy? I guess Jason and Tomer, you're probably closest to that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to see some transitioning, and I think from my experience, farmers, whether large or small, very adapt very well to changes in demand in that respect. So I would definitely expect to see changes. And then, by the way, we already see a lot of that going on now, even with foreign exchange fluctuations between the United States and Brazil now, where a lot of the a lot of people are now starting to buy more from Brazil just because it's cheaper, and you already see this.
Yeah.
I would say that when we talk about quality and trust, the U.S. is still kind of the gold standard for corn and soy across the planet, really. And so while we're seeing South America pick up yields, and while we're seeing increases in Eastern Europe, I think still the gold standard is really stuff delivered New Orleans to put on vessels that move out of here. And there's a lot of trust that goes in the U.S. for the way our government and system functions today. We might change a little bit of the way that we're growing it, but I don't see a massive change in the acreage that gets planted in the U.S. Or North America really for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't see massive acreage changes in what's going on.
Consumers have spoken pretty loudly. They want food at the perimeter of the store. They want fresh, right? And so, like our Future Consumer Index says, coming out of the pandemic, whatever that is, 65% of consumers expect to consume more fresh food than they did pre-COVID. Cooking at home has now become entertainment. Where some of these trends are making people reintroduce themselves to the food experience. So let's talk about small food. Let's talk about some of the perimeter of the store. Hunter and Michael, do you see that growth? Does that shift production away from the West Coast and start to distribute it more across the U.S., where maybe controlled environment or maybe small farms to go to high value crops? I mean, what are you thinking is going to happen there?
Hunter, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, well, I think just going back to AppHarvest, if you listen to how they talk about their markets and their value proposition being there in Morrison, Kentucky, that's about a drive, one day's drive to all the major markets, all the major cities in the United States. And so that's I think that's enabled by being able to produce these crops in a region that normally maybe isn't the most optimal, because you have this controlled environment where you can optimize everything. But I've seen this trend going on in urban centers. Just walk around a city, you'll see greenhouses on rooftops. Some restaurants will even have a greenhouse that serves the restaurant on the roof of their building. And so, I think controlled environments, whether, like I said earlier, vertical farming or greenhouses enable that in a unique way, being able to put a farm really anywhere, and then you get you get high quality and you get fresh just by default in that situation.
I think the small micro farmers don't have struggle to have the economies of scale to compete with the factory farmers. So I think they're both united though in terms of driving productivity, driving yield improvements. And so I think again you get this delineation, right? I think for the micro farmers you will start to see a high degree of decentralization. I think we're already seeing that, whether it's in urban or rural centers. And again, that speaks to a constituency who values the merits of that type of farming. But factory farming is going to continue to grow because there's broad swaths of the world's population who are more concerned about securing food as opposed to the derivation of food.
Yeah, folks that want to go to small form organic, remember that's a more labor intensive process too, right? And so we've got, one of the top issues in most agriculture environments is labor. So that I think that'll continue to be a challenge for us. And I'll tell you that during the pandemic, we saw food security rise on the national security agenda for most countries in the world, including our own. So places like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that import so much of their food are now looking at controlled environment and culture meat, saying we can actually control this and produce more than we ever have. So definitely a lot on the horizon. Lots of things to consider. Well, I think we're at time. So Jason, Tomer, Michael, Hunter, I want to really thank you for participating today. I think you gave a lot of great insights for investors and those that are involved in the ag tech community. So hats off to you and good luck with your company's progress. Thanks so much.
Thank you for moderating.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.
That was fun.
So off to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jason, Hunter, Michael, and Tomer for a really, really robust and interesting conversation. Hopefully it was benefit to our attendees today. So thank you guys so much once again, joining from literally all over the world for this conversation. So thank you. Next, we're going to move into our investor speed pitch. So we'll do our investor speed pitch, and then we'll reserve the last probably 30 minutes or so for networking, so you all can stick around the Lunchable platform and meet other attendees. For the next segment, though, this will be pretty simple. We'll have 5 to 6 investors to come up on stage. They'll spend about 90 seconds talking through their firm and a recent investment that they are excited about. And then we'll reserve a little bit of time for Q&A from the audience if you want to learn more about that particular investment. And certainly feel free to follow up with any attendees after. So we'll go ahead and bring up our first pitch person, which is Jonathan Bragdon from Capacity Capital.
Hey, I'm Jonathan, Capacity Capital. Capacity Capital, we decided to launch a fund in the middle of a pandemic. So this is our first year. We've made 2 investments already. Our whole criteria is around unlocking value in companies that are underestimated, mostly in the Southeast. We found that 90% of the companies of growing companies aren't as well suited to equity or debt as some super high growth companies or those with a lot of collateral. So we invest in revenues versus valuations or collateral. But because we do that, we twin really well with other forms of capital. And so a number of our deals, even the ones that we're looking at now, we're looking at 2 more before the end of the year, we can twin with debt because we're investing in the revenue, we're not taking a first, and we twin with equity because we're dilutive to the equity player. So we write $50,000 to $300,000 checks, typically in post-revenue, post-startup, but very small businesses, vertically agnostic, tech, services, can be light manufacturing, but primarily we're looking for companies that have a line of sight to doubling their revenue in 12 to 24 months. So a good example, one example, we have 2 examples. So one is a company that's based south of Boston, but we're looking to expand into the Southeast because they've a highly seasonal business, and they've now grown to $1.5 million in revenues. That's about a 70% growth this year. They're a managed marketplace. It connects an aging population with what they call sons and daughters to do odd jobs. But they've completed 70,000 hours of work. They've grown in this COVID environment. They've got solid margins. They're break even, positive unit economics. They've made their step jump, and now they're in a position where they've got a lot of angels that want to put some capital in, and they're looking for a lead, and they're about to do a round. And so this is part of what Capacity is able to do. We can end up being a feeder for venture capital, but also a deal finder for other forms of capital. So that's what I'm looking for, companies that are $250,000 in revenue up to $2 to $3 million in revenue, and looking for other forms of capital that we can partner with on deals.
Awesome. Thanks. Once again, feel free to follow up with our participants at any point after the pitch through the chat or through the lunch pool area where you can connect with other attendees. Now we'll pass on to Tony Jeff from Innovate Mississippi.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so Innovate Mississippi, a lot like Launch Tennessee, we work with early stage innovation-based companies here in Mississippi. We really, we're industry agnostic, but focus on first rounds of outside capital for these companies. We also manage a seed fund, but most of the investment we find for these companies comes through our angel investor network and the angel funds that we've helped put in place and continue to put in place around the state to work with these companies. I think, in terms of deal flow, we're working with partners all over the state, a lot through the universities as well. I wanted to highlight a particular company that was Lebaki. Lebaki is a very interesting company to me because of the fact that they have a virtual reality studio, as well as an educational partner to develop folks for their virtual reality work. But more interesting for us is the product side in terms of what they do. So Lebaki creates virtual reality, augmented reality content. That's the type of business that there is just a ton of, especially in training and other solutions like that, just a ton of that work for them. As a matter of fact, they're cash flow positive as a result of that work. And they develop through their educational partners more and more workers to meet that demand. But from our vantage point, the product opportunities are really the scalable opportunities for Lebaki. And so we've concentrated and worked with them as they develop concussion solutions through a VR headset model, where a VR headset on the side of a football field might be used to evaluate whether someone can go back in the game or needs to go to the hospital. The player might then take home that headset to begin their concussion recovery that evening. That's in conjunction with the University of Mississippi Medical Center. So Lebaki was just a company I wanted to pick just from our portfolio. Again, we're concentrating on early stage capital. So typically our companies are done with us when they're moving on to Series A. And so our Innovate Mississippi companies are only really in Mississippi, but quite a few of those companies, as we typically are getting about 8 funded a year at that first angel round.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Monique Villa from Mucker Capital and Build in Southeast.
Hi, Chris, and hi, everybody. Thanks for having me and for putting this on. My name is Monique Villa, and I'm an investor with Mucker Capital, and I'm based in Nashville. We've had our office here now for 2 years, and I've been in Nashville for 3. We're an early stage venture fund investing at a Fund 5, which we closed this year in 2020, writing checks from pre-seed, seed through Series A, $100K to $5 million initial checks with plenty of capital for follow-on, and specifically looking at software-enabled companies, both on the enterprise and consumer-facing side of things. So one deal I wanted to flag was one that we actually brought in to the portfolio and announced last month. It's a company called Cove Tool, based in Atlanta. Sandeep, the CEO, is fantastic, and I met her originally through ATDC earlier this year, and we ended up investing in Q3. So we led their $5.7 million Series A. We wrote a $4 million check, and the rest was filled out by existing investors. It was announced in October by TechCrunch, and the company's doing incredibly well. They have software and a suite of tools to optimize and simplify the building design process, really focused on how to create sustainability in the design of buildings. So their stakeholders that they're serving through their suite of tools include architects, engineers, owners, contractors, financiers, subcontractors, suppliers, manufacturers, permitting agencies. All of those stakeholders were actually going through the building design process by way of PDFs and emails and disparate workflow tools. And Cove Tool's platform actually enables them to collaborate in a single tool, turning a 6-week process into a 60-minute process, and streamlining the entire process from start to finish. So we're really excited about them, and recommend you check them out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Monique. Really appreciate it. And next up, I have Wes Barton from Third Prime.
Hey, Chris.
While Wes is coming up, I'll say, you can, oh, go ahead, Wes. You take it away.
Hey, Chris. And hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Nice to connect with each of you. So I'm Wes Barton, co-founder and managing partner of Third Prime. Our firm is headquartered in New York City, but we recently opened a Nashville office, and that's where I'm currently located. We're currently managing $100 million across 2 funds. We lead early stage investments, targeting 10 to 20% ownership with the first check. Looking to back exceptional founders from an idea on the back of a napkin all the way through the Series B. We write first checks of up to $2.5 million and hold meaningful reserves to follow on. We have a broad industry mandate, but increasingly have focused on using our capital to expand access to health and wealth. So currently investing primarily in fintech and health tech. We believe that these sectors afford the best opportunity to not only generate outsized investment returns, but also positively impact a lot of lives. As I mentioned, I'm new to Nashville and welcome the opportunity to get to know each of you. Feel free to reach out to me at wes@thirdprime.vc. One of the companies that I'd like to call out is a company that we recently invested in called 28 Health. It's out of Brooklyn, New York. The company is building the first comprehensive reproductive and sexual health platform to provide telemedicine, medication delivery, and ongoing care for underserved women. So think Medicaid, the uninsured, underinsured. The company is uniquely positioned to win the Medicaid market as they've onboarded Medicaid registered doctors, partnered with a Medicaid-enabled pharmacy, and built regulatory compliant processes scalable across the U.S. They've experienced really explosive growth over the last year or so, currently operating in 8 states with plans to expand across the country by the end of next year. In addition to go to market on the direct-to-consumer side, they're also working with payers and other partners to rapidly onboard new customers. As I mentioned, we just led their $5 million seed round alongside Town Hall Ventures and a few other firms. That deal was announced last month in TechCrunch. Really excited about the quality of the team. They're coming out of Bain, BCG, and the Gates Foundation. Really excited about this market. Think it's underserved. There are about 42 million U.S. women, largely ignored by the current healthcare system, which by our estimation translates to about a $17 billion TAM. We really like their wedge strategy. So they're starting today, by providing birth control, but soon to sort of treat STIs, pre and postnatal care and whatnot. And while they're not currently fundraising, given all the healthcare investors throughout Tennessee and Nashville, welcome the opportunity to put them on the radar. And again, feel free to reach out to me at Wes at thirdprime.vc to the extent that 28 is of interest, or if you'd just like to connect.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Wes. Really appreciate that. I was just saying, Monique and Wes both represent, folks who've moved from literally the West and East Coast to the Southeast, to Nashville specifically for those two, to take advantage of the great opportunities that exist here from an investment standpoint. So moving on, last but not least, our good friends in New Orleans at Benson Capital, Caroline Crumley.
Hey guys, my name is Caroline Crumley and I work for Benson Capital Partners. We're a relatively new venture capital fund based out of New Orleans and founded by Gail Benson, who's the owner of the Saints and Pelicans down here. Our investment thesis is all about trying to fill an investment capital vacuum that we see in the Gulf South, really filling the hole between kind of angel investors and folks that are able to attract capital from either coast. So looking to deploy check sizes of about $1 million to $5 million, are relatively industry agnostic, but are hyper-focused on finding companies between, let's say, Houston to Atlanta. A good example of that is a company we just invested in called Axosim. They're a biotech company that spun out of the Tulane PhD program, and they're the first 3D model of the nervous system, allowing pharmaceutical companies to do preclinical trials on a synthetic replica of the human nervous system. They've had really neat traction and are doing really well, have completed completed contracts across 8 of the top pharmaceutical companies across the country. And we're really excited for what's more to come. So lovely to meet all you guys. Would love to get connected and hear about deals that you guys are doing, looking to lead and also follow alongside. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caroline. Really appreciate that, and good to see you. Monique and Wes, you guys have a question in the Q&A chat, so definitely there. Once again, we just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has joined today. Thank you to our speakers, to Rob Dengoski, to Tomer Sock, to Jason Totsky, and to Michael Bartholomew for your keen insights earlier. And thank you to all of our pitch participants. Once again, my name is Chris Hatch. Feel free to follow. I'd give you my email, but I'm pretty sure you all have it at this point. Feel free to follow up with myself or any other member of the Launch Tennessee team if you'd like to engage more with us or any of our ecosystem partners across the state. Next, we'll just move on into the networking portion. Feel free to hop around to different virtual tables using the Lunchpool platform, which is a Tennessee-based startup. So definitely check out the platform, use it to its fullest extent. We look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.